What do you think hurts more? Losing your house, or realizing the person standing next to you had been quietly pushing you toward that loss for years? When I walked out of the courthouse carrying everything I still owned, it fit inside one worn-out gym bag. No house, no truck, no savings, no wedding ring. Just a hoodie, 2 pairs of jeans, a phone with 12% battery, and enough cash to buy a gas station coffee. If someone had told me 5 years earlier that my life would end up like that, I would have laughed in their face. Back then, I thought I had everything figured out. Turns out, confidence can make you blind. My name is Ethan Carter. I'm 41 years old, born and raised outside Columbus, Ohio. I'm not some genius entrepreneur or financial expert. I'm just a guy who spent most of his life fixing things. Cars, roofs, broken fences, leaky pipes. People in my town used to joke that if Ethan couldn't fix it, nobody could. Funny enough, I never learned how to fix my own marriage. I met my ex-wife, Vanessa, when I was 28. She walked into the hardware store where I worked part-time while running my handyman business. She was beautiful, not movie star beautiful, the kind of beautiful that made every room suddenly feel brighter. Confident, sharp, always smiling. She had this way of making you feel like you were the only person she wanted to talk to. Looking back, I realized she did that with everybody. At the time, I thought it meant I was special. She told me she admired hardworking men. She said she hated lazy people. She loved that I built my business from scratch. She said words like stability, family, future, everything a guy wants to hear. Within 2 years, we got married. Another year later, we bought our first house. Nothing fancy. 3 bedrooms, white siding, a tiny front porch. The backyard wasn't level, but I spent 2 summers fixing it. I planted trees with my own hands, built the deck myself, installed every cabinet in the kitchen. Every nail in that house had a memory attached to it. I wasn't just building a home. I was building proof that my life meant something. Vanessa worked in marketing. She always dressed perfectly, always knew what was trendy. She had friends who talked about luxury vacations, expensive restaurants, and designer handbags. I never really fit into those conversations. I'd show up wearing work boots while the other husbands wore loafers that probably cost more than my monthly truck payment. It never bothered me. At least, not at first. She'd laugh about it. "Oh, that's just Ethan. He doesn't care about fancy things." Everyone would smile. I'd smile too. What I didn't notice was that every joke chipped away at how people saw me. Eventually, she wasn't introducing me as her husband. She was introducing me as the guy who's always working. Sounds small, but little things have a funny way of becoming big things. The first real crack showed up around our 8th anniversary. I had landed the biggest contract of my career. A local property management company wanted me to renovate 12 rental homes over 6 months. It was enough work to hire 2 more guys. Enough money to finally pay off our mortgage early. I came home excited. I still remember setting the paperwork on the kitchen counter. I think we finally made it. Vanessa barely looked up from her laptop. "That's nice. That's nice." 3 words. 3 cold words. I thought she was stressed from work. Everybody has bad days. I ignored it. That became a habit. Ignoring things. About a month later, she asked if we could combine all our finances. "We're married," she said. "It'll be easier." I didn't hesitate. I trusted her completely. Every paycheck, every savings account, investment accounts, retirement funds, everything became joint. People can call me stupid if they want. Maybe I was. But trust isn't stupidity. Trust is what marriage is supposed to be. A year passed. Business kept growing. Money kept coming in. Life looked perfect from the outside. Inside, something felt different. Vanessa became harder to reach. Not physically, emotionally. She'd spend hours scrolling on her phone, smile at messages, lock the screen whenever I walked into the room, stay late at work. Weekend conferences became more frequent. Business dinners, networking events, girls' trips. There was always another reason. Whenever I asked questions, I somehow became the problem. "Why are you acting insecure? You don't trust me? I can't believe you're accusing me." After enough conversations like that, you stop asking questions. One Friday evening, I came home earlier than usual. The crew had finished ahead of schedule. I grabbed dinner on the way home because I thought it'd be a nice surprise. Her car wasn't there. No big deal. Then I noticed something odd. Our neighbor, Mrs. Green, was watering her flowers. She looked at me, then looked away. Fast. Too fast. I waved. She forced a smile. "You home early?" "Yeah." She hesitated. You doing okay? I laughed. Sure. Why? Oh, nothing. Nothing. Another small thing. Another brick added to the wall I couldn't see. Vanessa got home around 10. She smelled like expensive perfume. Not hers. Different. Sweeter. She claimed she'd hugged someone goodbye. Maybe she had. Maybe not. I wanted to believe her. So I did. Sometimes the lie you tell yourself is stronger than the lie someone else tells you. The next few months became strange. Packages kept arriving. Designer clothes. Shoes. Jewelry. Furniture I never agreed to buy. Every time I asked. It's for work. It's an investment. We can afford it. Could we? I started checking our bank statements. At first I assumed there'd been a mistake. There wasn't. Credit cards I'd never seen. Large withdrawals. Luxury hotels. Thousands disappearing every month. When I confronted her, she didn't apologize. She got angry. You spying on me now? I'm your husband. And that single word hit harder than any punch. And like being married suddenly meant nothing. Things got worse after that. One night we hosted a dinner at our house. Most of the guests were her co-workers. One of them was a guy named Derek. If arrogance could wear a suit, it would have looked exactly like him. Perfect haircut. Perfect teeth. The kind of guy who laughed too loudly at his own jokes. He shook my hand like he was doing me a favor. So you're the famous handyman. I smiled. Guilty. He looked around my living room. Nice place. Then he turned toward Vanessa. You've done a great job decorating. Not. You both. Just her. Vanessa smiled proudly. Thanks. I stood there holding a tray of burgers I had spent 3 hours grilling. Nobody mentioned the deck I'd built, the kitchen I'd remodeled, the stone fireplace I'd installed. It was invisible, just like me. Later that evening I walked back inside to grab more drinks. Their voices drifted from the dining room. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I simply stopped walking. Derek laughed. So, how much longer? Vanessa laughed too. I have a plan. Does he know? No. You sure? He never notices anything. Silence. Then all 3 of them laughed. 3 people. Which meant someone else was there. I stepped into the room. Conversation stopped instantly. Derek smiled. Vanessa picked up her wine. Nobody looked uncomfortable. Almost like they'd rehearsed it. What were you guys talking about? Vanessa answered immediately. Nothing important. There it was again. Nothing. 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 Funny how the biggest disasters always hide behind the smallest words. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling until sunrise. My gut kept telling me something was wrong. My brain kept arguing back. You're overthinking. You're tired. You're paranoid. Love makes you negotiate with reality. You keep searching for innocent explanations because the truth feels impossible. The following Tuesday, I got a call from my bank. The woman sounded polite, almost apologetic. Mr. Carter, we're calling to verify a request regarding a home equity line. I frowned. What request? The paperwork submitted yesterday. I felt every muscle in my body tighten. I didn't submit anything. Silence. Then the woman quietly asked, Is Mrs. Carter available? That was the moment. Not the divorce. Not losing the house. Not standing in court months later. That phone call. Because in that exact second, for the first time, I realized I wasn't just being lied to. I was already several moves behind in a game I didn't even know we were playing. And I had no idea how much worse it was about to get. I wish I could tell you that I immediately confronted Vanessa, that I stormed into the house, demanded answers, and uncovered the whole truth that same night. That's what happens in movies. Real life is slower. Messier. You spend days convincing yourself there has to be a reasonable explanation because the alternative is too painful to accept. After the call from the bank, I pulled my truck into a grocery store parking lot and just sat there with the engine running. The woman on the phone had repeated the same sentence 3 times. There was a request to open a home equity line of credit. Those words echoed in my head like a broken record. We had talked about remodeling the upstairs bathroom months earlier, but we'd agreed to wait. Neither of us had mentioned borrowing against the house. So why had someone submitted paperwork? I called Vanessa. No answer. I texted her. Hey, did you file anything with the bank? She replied 15 minutes later. Busy. We'll talk tonight. No explanation. No yes. No. Just, we'll talk tonight. That evening she walked into the kitchen like nothing had happened. She kicked off her heels, poured herself a glass of wine, and started scrolling through her phone. I stood there waiting. Finally I asked, So the bank called. She didn't even look up. I figured they might. You figured. It's not a big deal. It sounded like a pretty big deal. She sighed dramatically. Ethan, can you stop making everything into a crisis? I asked you a question. She finally looked at me. I was exploring financing options. For what? She shrugged. Our future. Our future. Maybe another property. Maybe an investment. Maybe a vacation home. I stared at her. Without telling me, she rolled her eyes. I hadn't decided yet. I could feel my heart pounding. You used our house. Our house, she corrected. That one word hit differently. Not because she was wrong. Because suddenly it felt like ownership had become a weapon. That night, I couldn't sleep again. Instead of lying there staring at the ceiling, I grabbed my laptop. For years, I'd trusted Vanessa to organize our finances. Bills, taxes, investments, credit cards, everything. I told myself it was because she enjoyed spreadsheets. The truth? I simply trusted her. I logged into every account I could remember. The checking account looked normal. The savings account didn't. The balance was nearly $70,000 lower than I expected. I refreshed the page. Same number. I checked again. Still the same. Then I opened the transaction history. Withdrawal. Transfer. Withdrawal. Transfer. Large amounts. 5,000. 8,000. 3,000. 10,000. Every few weeks. Going back almost a year. I clicked one of the transfer details. Destination account unavailable. Unavailable. I had no idea where the money had gone. The next morning I called my accountant. A guy named Frank who'd been handling my business taxes for almost 10 years. Frank wasn't emotional. He wasn't dramatic. He was the kind of man who treated every problem like it was just another math equation. When I explained what I'd found, he became unusually quiet. Ethan. Yeah. When was the last time you reviewed everything together? What do you mean? Everything. Accounts. Loans. Business liabilities. I frowned. I don't know. A while. He took a deep breath. I think you should come see me. Today. An hour later, I was sitting across from him. He slid several folders across his desk. I assumed you knew. Knew what? He adjusted his glasses. There are loans. What loans? Business loans. I never borrowed money. They're in your company records. I laughed. Actually laughed. That's impossible. Frank didn't smile. There are 2 business credit lines. A vehicle refinance. And, he hesitated. A personal guarantee. I felt my stomach tighten. For how much? He turned the paperwork toward me. $384,000. I stared at the number. It didn't even look real. I never signed this. Frank looked uncomfortable. That's the problem. One signature looked like mine. But it wasn't. Not exactly. Close enough that most people wouldn't notice. Different enough that I knew. Someone had practiced it. A lot. I drove home in complete silence. No music. No radio. Nothing. I kept replaying every financial conversation we'd ever had. Every document Vanessa had casually placed in front of me. Sign here. Initial there. This is just insurance paperwork. This one's for taxes. This one's for refinancing the truck. Had I actually read everything? No. I trusted my wife. That realization made me feel sick. When I walked into the house, Vanessa was sitting on the patio drinking iced coffee. She smiled. You're home early. I looked at her for a long moment. I talked to Frank. The smile disappeared. What about the loans? She froze. Only for a second. Then she recovered. Oh, so you know. You forged my signature. She laughed. Actually laughed. It wasn't forging. What? We're married. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. That's your defense. You would have signed anyway. I never got the chance. She crossed her arms. You're overreacting. No. I'm finally reacting. The argument exploded. Neighbors probably heard every word. For years I'd avoided conflict. That day, something finally snapped. Where's the money? I invested it. In what? She looked away. Different opportunities. What opportunities? You wouldn't understand. I took a step closer. Try me. She smirked. You think fixing gutters makes you a financial expert? That sentence stayed with me. Not because it was clever. Because it was cruel. It wasn't about money. She wanted me to feel small. Then she delivered another punch. You've always been comfortable being average. Average. Funny. I'd spent 15 years working 60-hour weeks. Missed birthdays. Skipped vacations. Built a business with my own hands. Everything we owned had been paid for by those average hands. Yet somehow, she had rewritten history. That evening I packed a bag. Not because I wanted to leave. Because I needed air. I checked into the cheapest motel I could find 20 miles away. The room smelled like bleach and old carpet. I sat on the edge of the bed staring at my phone. Nobody called. Nobody checked on me. Not even Vanessa. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. It wasn't her. It was my younger sister, Megan. You okay? I frowned. Why? I ran into Vanessa today. What did she say? There was a pause. She told people you were having emotional issues. I felt like someone had punched me. What? She said work stress had made you unstable. I couldn't speak. Megan continued carefully. I didn't believe her. But, what? She sounded convincing. That's when I realized something terrifying. She wasn't just hiding things. She was building a story, a version of me, one where I was irrational, unpredictable, financially irresponsible, the perfect villain. And she'd apparently been telling that story for a while. The next few days proved it. Friends stopped answering my calls. One client canceled a renovation project without explanation. Another asked if everything was okay at home. Even my own cousin awkwardly said, I hope you get the help you need. Help? What help? Vanessa had gone on a campaign while I was still trying to understand what was happening. She wasn't reacting. She was executing a plan. Then something happened that changed everything. Late Friday afternoon, my phone rang. Unknown number. Normally, I would have ignored it. Something told me not to. This is Ethan. A woman's voice answered. Mr. Carter? Yes. My name is Lisa. I don't know if I should be calling. My heart started racing. Calling about what? There was a long silence. Then she whispered, I work with your wife. Every muscle in my body went tense. I think you're being lied to. I swallowed hard. What do you mean? Another pause. I've seen things. What things? I can't explain over the phone. Please. I'm scared she'll find out. Who? Vanessa. She already suspects someone knows. My pulse was pounding in my ears. When can we meet? Lisa hesitated. Tomorrow. 9 in the morning. There's a small diner off Route 33. You'll recognize me. Before I could ask another question, she hung up. I barely slept that night. My mind kept racing. Was this finally the proof I needed? Or was it another trap? By 8:30 the next morning, I was sitting inside that little diner with a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. Every time the door opened, I looked up. At exactly 9 o'clock, a woman in her mid-30s walked in. Brown jacket, nervous eyes. She looked around until she spotted me. Then she walked over and quietly sat down across from me. Without saying hello, without ordering coffee, she reached into her purse, pulled out a thick manila envelope, and slid it across the table. I copied these before anyone could delete them. I stared at the envelope. What is it? Lisa looked me straight in the eyes. The reason your life is about to fall apart. I slowly placed my hand on the envelope. I had no idea that opening it would reveal something even worse than an affair. It would prove that I had never actually been the target. I had been the tool. I stared at the manila envelope for what felt like an hour. The diner around us faded into the background. Forks clinked against plates. Someone laughed near the counter. A waitress asked if we wanted more coffee. Neither of us answered. Lisa kept looking over her shoulder as if she expected someone to walk through the door. Finally, I broke the silence. Why are you doing this? She looked down at her hands. Because I should have done it months ago. What changed? Her eyes met mine. I realized she wasn't going to stop. My fingers felt strangely numb as I opened the envelope. Inside were printed emails, screenshots, bank statements, calendar entries. Some documents had sticky notes attached. Others had dates circled in red. The first page made no sense. A list of properties, addresses, estimated values, loan balances. My house was at the top. The second page made even less sense. A spreadsheet, names, a column labeled potential assets, another labeled timeline. Then I saw my own name, Ethan Carter. Beside it were 3 words, high trust level. I looked up. What is this? Lisa swallowed hard. It's something they used internally. They? She hesitated. Vanessa. And Derek. I felt a chill run through my body. Derek from the dinner? She nodded. They've been working together for almost 2 years. Doing what? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she slid another document toward me. This. It was an email. From Derek. Addressed to Vanessa. One sentence jumped off the page. As long as he keeps believing you're on his side, everything stays simple. I read it again. And again. The words didn't change. You said I wasn't the target. Lisa nodded. You weren't. I don't understand. She leaned closer. Derek wasn't interested in destroying you. He was interested in what you owned. My business. Everything. The house. The credit. The equity. The reputation. He kept saying you were. She searched for the right words. Financially useful. Useful. Not dangerous. Not important. Just useful. I wanted to punch something. Instead, I asked another question. Who is Derek really? Lisa let out a tired laugh. Not the man everyone thinks. She explained that Derek had introduced himself at the marketing firm as some kind of investment consultant. He always seemed connected. Always knew people with money. Always talked about opportunities. Luxury developments. Vacation rentals. Commercial projects. He dressed like success. Talked like success. Acted like success. But according to Lisa, he rarely invested his own money. He preferred finding people who already had assets. People who trusted someone else. People exactly like me. Vanessa wasn't his first partner. That sentence stopped me. What do you mean? Lisa looked uncomfortable. I've heard rumors. What rumors? There were others. Other women. They'd get close to someone financially stable. Encourage investments. Convince them to refinance. Open credit lines. Move money around. Then, when everything became complicated, they disappeared. I stared at her. You're telling me this was planned? She nodded slowly. I think so. The idea sounded insane. Like something from a crime show. Except, every document sitting in front of me made it harder to dismiss. Lisa pointed to another page. Look at the dates. I compared them. Every large transfer from our savings account happened within 48 hours of a meeting between Vanessa and Derek. Every single one. That wasn't coincidence. That was coordination. Why didn't you go to the police? I asked. Lisa looked genuinely frightened. Because I don't actually know what's legal and what isn't. They're careful. Very careful. Everything is buried under paperwork. Consulting agreements. Investment discussions. Emails that sound innocent. She paused. But once I saw your signature, she looked at me. I knew something wasn't right. Then she said something that made my stomach turn. Vanessa talks about you. I didn't answer. Almost every day. What does she say? Lisa looked away. Are you sure you want to know? No. But tell me anyway. Lisa sighed. She says you're predictable. That routine makes people easy to control. I felt my jaw tighten. Anything else? She says you're too decent. I frowned. Too decent? Derek once joked that honest people are the easiest people to manipulate because they assume everyone else thinks the same way. Those words stayed with me. Maybe because they were partly true. I had spent my whole life assuming people meant what they said. That promises mattered. That marriage meant partnership. Apparently, not everyone saw the world that way. Lisa pushed one final folder toward me. I almost didn't bring this. Inside was a printed conversation. Most of it was ordinary. Work schedules, lunch plans, office gossip. Then, near the bottom, a message from Derek. Once he signs the final restructuring documents, there's no reason to keep pretending. Vanessa replied. He'll sign. He always does. Another message appeared a few minutes later. And after that, her answer was only 4 words. Then we're finally free. I couldn't breathe. Not because of the affair. At that point, I already knew. It was those words. He always does. She knew me that well. She knew I trusted her. She knew I'd sign almost anything if she said it was for us. She hadn't loved my trust. She'd depended on it. I thanked Lisa. She refused to let me walk her to her car. Please don't contact me for a while. I need to protect my job. Before leaving, she stopped beside the table. One more thing. What? Don't let her know you have those papers. Why? Because if she realizes someone talked, she'll move faster. Then she walked away. I never even got the chance to ask if I'd see her again. Instead of driving home, I went straight to Frank's office. He spent almost 2 hours reading every page. He rarely showed emotion. This time, he looked angry. This changes things. How? He tapped one document. There's a pattern. What kind of pattern? I think someone has been intentionally increasing your personal liability. So if your business fails, you don't just lose the company. You lose everything personally. I stared at him. The house. Yes. My truck. Yes. My savings. Yes. I felt sick. So that's the plan? Frank didn't answer immediately. Finally, he said, if I'm right, they're counting on you collapsing under debt. Driving home, I kept replaying one question. Why? If Vanessa wanted a divorce, why not just ask for one? Why spend years building this elaborate mess? The answer came before I reached my driveway. Money. A normal divorce divides what exists. A financial collapse changes who gets blamed. If I looked reckless, irresponsible, buried in debt, she could walk away looking like the victim. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed something strange. A black SUV sat across the street. Engine running. Windows tinted. As soon as I got out of my truck, the SUV slowly drove away. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe not. After everything I'd learned, nothing felt ordinary anymore. Inside the house, Vanessa acted unusually cheerful. She was humming while making dinner. "You want pasta?" I looked at her. The same woman. The same smile. The same voice. Yet somehow, she looked like a complete stranger. "I already ate." She shrugged. "Suit yourself." Then she casually asked, "Where were you today?" There it was. The fishing question. I answered carefully. "Running errands." "What kind?" "Business." She smiled. "Good. You've been working too hard." The irony almost made me laugh. That night, while she was upstairs taking a shower, I walked into the home office. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for answers. Most drawers contained ordinary paperwork, office supplies, receipts, nothing unusual. Then I noticed a small fireproof box inside the bottom cabinet. Locked. I searched around until I found a key taped underneath the desk. My hands shook as I unlocked it. Inside were passports, insurance documents, some cash, and another envelope. This one had my name written across the front. Ethan. I opened it. Inside were divorce papers, and signed, prepared almost 4 months earlier. For months, she'd already planned to leave. While we were still eating dinner together, while I was renovating the deck, while I was talking about taking a vacation, while I still believed we were fixing our future, she'd already hired an attorney. Then something else slipped out. A yellow sticky note. Only one sentence. Handwritten. "Wait until refinancing is complete." I froze. Refinancing. The home equity loan. The business debt. Everything connected. Everything. I suddenly realized the divorce had never been the first step. It was the last one. And if I had signed just one more stack of papers, I would have handed them exactly what they wanted. At that moment, I heard the upstairs bathroom door open. Vanessa was coming downstairs. I shoved everything back into the fireproof box just seconds before I heard her footsteps approaching the office. She stopped in the doorway, still drying her hair with a towel. She smiled. "What are you doing?" I forced myself to smile back. "Looking for an old tax receipt." She studied me for a long second, then nodded. "Find it." "Not yet." She walked away. But before disappearing down the hallway, she glanced back at me. Just for a second. It wasn't a loving look. It wasn't even suspicious. It was something far more unsettling. It was the look of someone silently checking whether the trap was still working. And for the first time since all this started, I knew something she didn't. I had stopped walking into it. People like to believe that, and sometimes, it needs you to stay quiet long enough for someone else to make a mistake. For the first time in months, I stopped reacting. Instead, I started paying attention. The morning after I found the divorce papers, I woke up before sunrise. Vanessa was still asleep. For years I'd watched her sleep and felt grateful that she was beside me. That morning I looked at her and realized something strange. I didn't hate her. Not anymore. Hate takes energy. I was simply exhausted. The woman lying next to me wasn't the person I'd married. Maybe she never had been. Maybe I'd fallen in love with a version of her that only existed when she needed something. I quietly got dressed and left without waking her. Frank had already called an attorney he trusted. His name was Daniel Brooks. He wasn't flashy. No expensive watch. No polished sales pitch. His office looked like it hadn't been redecorated since the early 2000s. But within 10 minutes of meeting him, I understood why Frank trusted him. Daniel listened. Really listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't promise miracles. When I finished explaining everything, he folded his hands. "Mr. Carter, I've handled hundreds of divorces. This one isn't just a divorce." I leaned forward. "What is it?" He looked me in the eye. "It's a financial strategy. And whoever designed it expected you to panic. So what do I do?" His answer surprised me. "Nothing." I frowned. "What do you mean, nothing?" "You go home. You stay calm. You sign absolutely nothing. You move no money. You accuse no one. You let them believe you're still confused." That sounded impossible. Daniel smiled slightly. "The biggest advantage you have right now is that they think you're still the same trusting man." For the next 2 weeks, I played the role they'd written for me. I came home at the usual time, asked ordinary questions, cooked dinner twice, even fixed the loose gate in the backyard. Vanessa seemed relieved, almost cheerful. She thought the storm had passed. She had no idea I'd already hired an attorney. Then the little mistakes started appearing. Once you stop arguing with someone, they often become careless. Vanessa left her laptop unlocked one afternoon while taking a phone call outside. I wasn't looking for gossip. I was looking for confirmation. What I found was far worse. An email draft addressed to Derek. He's calming down. I don't think he suspects anything anymore. Below that, attorney says timing is still good if we finalize before the end of the month. Attorney, not mine. Hers. Everything had a schedule, even the end of our marriage. I didn't touch the computer. I simply took 2 photos with my phone and walked away. That evening, Derek called the house. I answered. There was a long pause. I was looking for Vanessa. She's upstairs. Oh. He sounded disappointed. Tell her I'll call later. Before hanging up, he added, hope things are getting better. I smiled despite myself. They are. He laughed politely. I'm glad. Neither of us meant what we said. 3 days later, Megan came over. She brought coffee and a box of donuts. It was an excuse. She knew I needed someone in my corner. After Vanessa left for work, Megan looked around the empty kitchen. I don't recognize this place anymore. Neither do I. She hesitated. I've been hearing things. I figured. Most of them don't even sound like you. What kind of things? She sighed. That you're gambling. I blinked. What? That you're hiding money. That you're drinking. I couldn't help laughing. Not because it was funny. Because it was ridiculous. I don't even like casinos. I know. And I haven't had more than 2 beers in months. I know. She reached across the table. The people who actually know you aren't believing it. That sentence mattered more than she realized. When someone tries to destroy your reputation, you start wondering if everyone believes them. Sometimes, you only need one person to remind you that the truth still exists. Later that week, Daniel called. I need you in my office. When I arrived, he had several documents spread across the conference table. I requested preliminary financial records. And he tapped a file. Your wife recently contacted a real estate broker. My stomach tightened. To sell the house? No. To estimate its market value. So she also requested information about quick sale buyers. I stared at him. What does that mean? It means someone wanted the house sold fast. Usually below market value. I immediately thought of Derek. Daniel nodded before I even spoke. I'm thinking the same thing. Then he slid another paper toward me. This is interesting. It was a business registration. A limited liability company. Created 8 months earlier. The listed owner wasn't Vanessa. It was Derek. But farther down, there was another name. A silent partner. Not publicly advertised. Vanessa. I felt every muscle in my neck tighten. So that's where the money went. Daniel didn't answer right away. It may explain part of it. But I don't think it's the whole picture. There are still missing funds. For the first time, I asked the question I'd been avoiding. If they take everything, what happens to me? Daniel looked thoughtful. You start over. I laughed bitterly. At 41, he leaned back. You know what most people underestimate? I shook my head. Skills. He pointed toward me. They can divide your assets. They can freeze accounts. They can even force the sale of property. But they can't take the fact that you know how to build things. Those words stayed with me. Not because they solved anything. Because they reminded me of something I'd forgotten. Everything I'd ever owned. I'd built from nothing once before. That weekend I drove past one of my old renovation projects. A retired couple still lived there. Mr. Henderson happened to be outside trimming a hedge. Ethan, haven't seen you in forever. We talked for 20 minutes. As I was leaving, he casually asked, You taking new jobs again? I frowned. I never stopped. He looked confused. Really? I heard you shut the business down. My chest tightened. Who told you that? I don't remember. Someone around town. Another lie. Another piece of the campaign. Someone wanted clients to disappear before the divorce even happened. Monday morning proved it. I'm working. She laughed nervously. Well, that's good. I was wondering if you'd still remodel our kitchen. By the time I hung up, an idea had begun forming. Someone was trying to erase my reputation. Maybe instead of chasing every rumor, I should simply let my work speak again. That afternoon, I rented a tiny workshop on the edge of town. Nothing fancy. Old concrete floor. One garage door. Leaky roof. The owner apologized for the condition. I smiled. I've worked in worse. When he handed me the keys, I stood alone inside the empty building. There was nothing there. No tools. No shelves. No equipment. Just silence. Oddly enough, it felt peaceful. For months I'd been focused on everything I was losing. Standing in that empty shop, I remembered something important. Empty spaces can also be beginnings. That evening Vanessa noticed the dust on my boots. Working somewhere? A little. She smiled. I thought business was slow. It is. Another lie. Not because I enjoyed lying. Because Daniel was right. She needed to believe I was still drifting. Still confused. Still harmless. The following Friday, something happened that none of us expected. Lisa called. Her voice was shaking. They know. I stood up so quickly my chair tipped over. What happened? I think someone copied security logs. They're trying to figure out who accessed the files. Did they mention you? No. But Derek asked everyone strange questions today. My pulse started racing. What kind of questions? He asked if anyone had been talking to you. I looked toward the window. For the first time in days, that black SUV was parked across the street again. Engine running. Not moving. Just waiting. I lowered my voice. Lisa, listen carefully. If anyone asks, you've never spoken to me. I understand. She paused. Be careful, Ethan. They're moving faster. The call ended. I looked out the window once more. The SUV slowly pulled away. But this time, I caught a glimpse of the driver as it passed. It wasn't Derek. It wasn't anyone I recognized. Which meant something even worse. The game had grown bigger than the two people who had betrayed me. And whatever came next was no longer just about a marriage. There's something nobody tells you about betrayal. The hardest part isn't discovering the lie. It's waking up every morning and realizing the person you trusted most had been living in a completely different reality than you. By the time the divorce papers officially arrived, I wasn't shocked. I was ready. Daniel had warned me exactly how it would happen. The paperwork painted a simple story. According to Vanessa, our marriage had broken down because I had become financially reckless, emotionally unavailable, and incapable of making responsible decisions. If I hadn't lived through the previous 15 years myself, I almost would have believed it. The first court hearing wasn't dramatic. No shouting. No surprise witnesses. Just stacks of documents and two very different versions of the same marriage. Vanessa barely looked at me. Derek wasn't there. That alone told me plenty. People like him rarely stand in the spotlight. They prefer someone else to take the risk. Daniel stood and calmly presented our evidence. The timeline. The unexplained transfers. The forged signatures that required forensic review. The emails showing financial coordination. The hidden business registration. The draft divorce documents prepared months before our separation. One piece by itself didn't prove everything. Together, they told a story that was impossible to ignore. For the first time since this nightmare had started, I watched Vanessa lose her composure. It lasted maybe 3 seconds. But I saw it. She wasn't afraid of me. She was afraid that the story she'd spent years creating was beginning to fall apart. The legal process wasn't quick. It took months. Some debts were still mine to fight. Some money was never recovered. The house had to be sold. Watching strangers walk through the rooms I'd built with my own hands felt like losing a family member. I stood in the empty living room one last time, ran my hand across the stone fireplace, looked out at the deck I'd built. Then I locked the front door. Not because I had stopped loving that house, because it no longer represented my future, only my past. The workshop I'd rented slowly became my entire world. At first, it was just me. One toolbox, one workbench, one old radio. I accepted every honest job I could find. Cabinets, decks, custom shelves, garage renovations. Sometimes I'd work 12 hours straight. Not because I had to, because every finished project reminded me of something important. Nobody could forge my ability to work. Nobody could repossess experience. Nobody could take away the years I'd spent learning a trade. One afternoon, Mr. Henderson stopped by the shop. I've been telling everyone you're back. He smiled. So has Mrs. Alvarez. A week later, another customer called. Then another. Then another. I never spent money on advertising. People remembered 2 things. Whether you kept your word, and whether your work lasted. Fortunately, both were still true. Several months later, Megan walked into the shop carrying a cardboard box. What's this? She set it on the table. Old business cards. I laughed. I thought we threw those away. No. I figured you might need them again. I picked one up. The logo was faded. The phone number hadn't changed. Neither had my name. For the first time in a long while. Seeing my own name made me proud. Lisa eventually left the marketing company. We met for coffee after everything was over. I kept thinking, she said, that maybe I should have spoken sooner. I shook my head. You spoke when you were ready. She smiled. I guess we both did. We never became close friends. Life doesn't always work that way. But I'll always be grateful she chose courage over comfort. Sometimes one honest person is enough to change someone else's future. As for Derek, the last thing I heard was through Frank. Several business partners had quietly distanced themselves after questions started being asked. Whether he ever faced consequences beyond that, I honestly don't know. And eventually, I stopped caring. There comes a point where revenge stops looking satisfying. Peace becomes much more valuable. People sometimes ask whether I forgive Vanessa. That's a complicated question. I don't want revenge. I don't wake up hoping her life falls apart. But forgiveness doesn't mean pretending nothing happened. It means refusing to let what happened decide who you become. Those are two very different things. About 2 years after the divorce, I hired my first employee. 6 months later, I hired a second. The little workshop became too small. We moved into a larger building. Customers came because someone they trusted recommended us. Not because of flashy marketing. Not because of social media. Because trust travels farther than gossip. It just takes longer. One rainy afternoon, I drove past my old neighborhood. The trees I'd planted were taller now. Kids were riding bicycles down the street. Someone else lived in my old house. For a moment, I considered stopping. Instead, I kept driving. Home isn't always the place you leave behind. Sometimes, home is the person you finally become. If there's one lesson I took from everything that happened, it's this. Manipulative people rarely begin by taking your money. They begin by convincing you to doubt yourself. Little by little, conversation by conversation, until their version of reality becomes louder than your own. The only way out is to pay attention to actions instead of promises, to patterns instead of excuses, and to remember that trust should never require you to stop asking honest questions. I lost a house. I lost a truck. I lost nearly every dollar I'd saved. For a while, I thought I'd lost my future too. But I was wrong. Because everything they took was something I could rebuild. The one thing they could never take was the ability to stand back up, learn from the pain, and create something with my own 2 hands. In the end, that turned out to be the most valuable thing I ever owned.